Hello, everyone. Warm welcome again to Berlinale Talents. Warm welcome to the How Hebel am Ufer. It's been a week of Berlinale Talents everywhere. We said we don't go online, we go everywhere this year, and we traveled the world to many different places, and we brought that world here together with our talents, together with many experts, and of course also with guests coming in from the Berlinale. And I'm particularly proud that we were managing to bring that world also into conversation, so that we exchanged among each other here, dreamt together, and I would even say dream on a little bit further, because in the people, in the connections that we've made, and of course in the films, these dreams can now go on. And we will today bring you someone who is particularly interesting, of course, in the way she's a screenwriter and in the way she's also a director, but also she's someone really interesting to speak about here today and to bridge, in a way, the worlds in between screenwriting and directing, bridging the worlds in between realities and dreaming. And I won't say much more, but I want to introduce you to Anas Sareen, who is here with us, and he will welcome you to our guest, which is Céline Sciamma. Céline, thank you for being here. Anas, thank you for being here. Enjoy.
Thank you, Florian, and good evening to everyone at home, wherever you are. Indeed, tonight is a very special conversation with one of France's most prominent filmmakers, Céline Sciamma. Bonsoir, Céline.
Bonsoir.
Céline, your films are very particular in their construction. They're sort of, as far as I see them, delicate machines where narratives move on these female protagonists that are always present in your filmmaking, whether they be girls or women or even older women. They span the generations and always introduce us into their worlds through, looking, the gaze, desire. These crafted little machines are very special constructions. And I think that, for example, Florian mentioned Petite Maman, which you've come to the Berlinale with, which is your fifth feature, is a prime example of that. And I'm very happy that we can talk about it towards the end of the talk, if that suits you, because it's a wonderful gift to the audience. But to start with the beginning of your filmmaking career and perhaps the first three features, they're all in a, so just to cite them, Naissance des pieuvres, Water Lilies, Tomboy, and Bande de Filles, which are all in a very specific cinematic genre, the coming-of-age movie. Why do you think you felt so attracted to that genre in particular?
Well, I've been answering that question a lot, and I'm always trying to answer it differently. Mostly also because, it's a path from film to film. And of course, even though these three first films were built, they were built in the end as a trilogy, but I hadn't each film in mind while I was doing each film. But I decided to name it a trilogy because I wanted to depart from it in a way. So it's looking back, but trying to answer profoundly from today. I forgot your question. What was your question?
Maybe the best way to answer it.
What attracted me to this genre? Well, I've always considered that it was a genre. It's a true genre, but I don't know if it's really all told really well as a genre, especially from the French perspective and more US perspective, or where teenagers in French movies and US movie and teen movies are not at all portrayed the same way. It's not the same rules. It's not the same culture. And back when I was doing Water Lilies and on those three first films, I must say I was always trying to merge two kinds of tradition. The French one, which is considering that looking at adults or kid isn't about only addressing yourself to kids or teenagers, but is a cinematic genre. It's putting big characters on screen. And the teen movie, much more regarding the US tradition, which is much more of a bubble. There are no grown-ups, whereas, you know, in France, since Les 400 coups by François Truffaut, it's also about a kid like struggling with the world of adults and trying to escape that world or fit in. Or so I always thought, oh, I'm kind of doing this fusion. Yeah. And I used to tell it that way, so I could easily answer like that, like a robot.
I'll take that answer. I'll take that answer, and I think it's a wonderful way to begin, because I think that is what makes your position in French cinema so interesting, is that you have this Anglo-Saxon tradition that's really present, and it's, you know, aesthetically present, but it's also present in terms of the gender politics, and we'll get to that. But I think as a starting point, to say that there's a tension between these two traditions is not wrong. And what I think would be fascinating to find out is how, you know, so we have this genre of coming of age, but I'd be curious to hear about your artistic coming of age. So, you know, what type of films do you remember as a child thinking, oh God, that moved me beyond anything else I've seen? Or what books, because obviously you started your career as a screenwriter, and screenwriting is at the center of your filmmaking as well. What books just moved you beyond, you know, to tears in your little bedroom, like your characters?
Well, it all started with comic books, I must say, and the strong. I mean, the Belgium and French tradition of the bande dessinée. So it's either Tintin or Asterix, or I mean, this tradition of the comic book, which is called ligne claire, clear line, which is a term that I really like to use talking to my collaborators. You know, always trying to find the clear line, and it's ligne claire is really linked to this Belgium and French tradition of comic books. It's really linked to Hergé. And you know, sometimes when I have trouble finding an idea for editing, like for instance in the first scene of Portrait, when she's in the boat and then the canvas fell into the ocean, I was like, oh, how this is such an action scene. How am I going to do this? You know, in the language of the film. Plus, it's the first scene, so it shouldn't be like, because there's a stunt woman and everything. So then you're less free. How do we portray this? And, you know, and I'm always thinking, okay, look, what would, you know, Tintin, how would it be, you know? how something falls in the water, how do you edit that? So that was my first culture. I learned to reading comic books. And it's also, we can say, a fusion between, you know, literature and image, and already some kind of storyboarding, strong perspective. Yeah, and addressing a perspective that is already both addressing adults and kids, which is also a kind of fusion that emerged that I'm always trying to do, whereas it's official or secret. This time it's official. And then I was also curated a lot as a kid by my father, who was a sci-fi geek.
So you grew up watching Star Trek and Star Wars and other such cultural products? Regarding the film, but I think that was a cultural bath that we were all in. But regarding literature, reading sci-fi when you're an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, starting your career as a reader in novels with Ray Bradbury, or it's a strong baptism, science fiction. And then as a teenager, my only revolt, my only rebellion against that curation was to actually embrace the French classic of literature, Flaubert, Balzac, Zola, and be more study this literature with passion. Study, and what do you mean by study? Because obviously the three authors that you've cited are 19th century authors that are working in a particular style, naturalism, a lot of irony, obviously Flaubert, a lot of attention to detail. So is that really what is happening in your mind? You're looking at the world differently after reading these authors. You're looking perhaps with a double edge, maybe even on people around you, in your family, on society. I mean, any reader of Flaubert is immediately a critic of society. So I'm wondering, from an early age, is that already in conjunction with Tintin something that's happening?
Well, I think, I don't know if as a kid or as a teenager, I felt like literature was helping me to look at the world differently. I just think it helped me to figure out the world, really. It was an education. It's also a cultural education that also was to be deconstructed. So that's why I'm very happy that I was given the opportunity to be an early reader, especially of the novel of the 19th century that I think are still feeding my work. Really, I think we're nourishing for some parts of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and that we can say that page 28 is a cinematic idea, but it's also very much an idea of a novel of the 19th century. And we could say that Petite Maman has a lot of links with Henry James, for instance, also, which was which is a recent read in my life.
Which one in particular, can I ask?
Well, all of them, but I mean, I really like I don't know what's the title in English, but it's the motif dans la tapisserie, which is
the figure in the carpet.
Figure in the carpet, and it was a curation given to me by my very dearest Italian distributor, Jerry Rezzini. He's a legend, and he told me, I was talking to him about writing Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And he was telling me, you should read Henry James. And I did, and I think it gave me, a lot to think.
So on the one hand...
So it wasn't about reading literature and then seeing the world differently. It was actually reading literature and understanding the world as it went, actually. And seeing, understanding the world better. Also, because from my perspective, being a gay kid and knowing very early that I had other feelings, other perspective, other points of view around everything in life.
Reading.
I mean, I was lacking literature that would help me fit in the world. I was really feeding on literature that would give me the keys of the world, even though I'm not fitting in. Mm-hmm.
And obviously, literature does help us interpret the world and figure it out, but perhaps more predominantly, it helps us figure ourselves out. And obviously, as a young gay kid, you're trying to understand perhaps what's gone wrong or why you're different or, why you don't quite fit in. And I wonder, in these readings, were there particular characters? Because everything that you've cited, these are all male authors, but were there particular characters that emerge from this tapestry of literature that, you thought, there's something here that I've put my finger on, as a queer reader always does, you're always double guessing, double reading. And here, there's this sort of bubble, and I can feel it, and I'm interested in that, because that's also what your films explore, that ambiguity.
Yes, of course. I mean, queer readers are great readers because sometimes it's just because they share a secret with an author or a book that is inside. Sometimes it's just because they're great at reinventing fiction and how it feels. Because it's not about what's hidden in a fiction, it's about how you feel about it. Absolutely. So it's not about, is that character lesbian or is that a romance, that friendship is a love story. It's not about finding out. It's not about the clues. I mean, the clues are great. It's great to read a book and find out the clues. But it's also mostly about how you appropriate things. It's two different pleasures. It's the pleasure of, finding out the secret and sharing the secret. And it's also about like, this makes me feel, I don't know. This is mine somehow, and because I'm gonna play with it, and I don't know if that's, I don't know if I'm really saying something right now.
Well, perhaps, I mean, I'm just trying to sort of imagine what your, the bedroom walls.
No, go for it. I lost my thing. I just wanted to tell you that I never really identify with character, and I'm not a character-driven person. And I know that it's always kind of disappointing when I do Q&As because everyone is always asking me about how are the characters. I'm like, they don't exist. So mostly the secret that I found in book is literature. And the fire that I found in book is literature. It's not about that character or that plot. And the fire that I found in cinema, is the fact that cinema exists. And the books that I love the most, it's the books that are celebrating literature. And the films that I like the most are the films that are celebrating cinema. And that can be either Wall-E or Jeanne Dielman. But they are celebrating cinema. And that's always what I'm looking for as an audience, and what I'm looking for as an artist, is that when you get out of the room, like when you close a book, you're not in love with that book or that character, or you don't connect or identify. I think that's very poor. You just love literature, or you just love cinema, and that's what I was looking for as a reader and as a viewer. I was looking for that feeling of falling in love with art, really, more than characters or authors, or
But the books.
And I've been a fan because that's if you ask about how I was as a kid, I was a fan. Really.
But you were a fan of. I mean, in what you say, what I understand is that it's not so much about the emotional implication with character, but the films or books that produce what you describe are doing that because they're pushing the boundaries of style within a given medium. And I think that's...
Yes, and I mean, I think it's always an opportunity when you don't fit in. As a queer reader or as a queer viewer, I can't really connect with the characters. They're not designed for me to connect with them. So we have to connect with something higher. Either our own imagination facing the opera, or just the fact that just to fall in love with somebody's brain also.
And so we've covered. I'm looking at your bookshelf. I'm looking at this young Céline Sciamma's bedroom, right? So on the bookshelf, I see Tintin, I see Henry James, I see Flaubert, and then on the TV playing in this, 1970s, 1980s living room. What are you seeing?
Denver, the last dinosaur. Nobody knows that.
Tell us about Denver.
I'm seeing. I'm a kid of TV. I'm a kid of VCR, so I'm a kid who records late TV to see films. So at first it's just basically what is on, and what is on is, and also I'm an elder sister. I have 2 siblings, so it's watching TV together, and also, I had a very long childhood, because I had brothers and sisters. And so I kept watching, what we were often as kids. And, in France in the 80s, it was the rise of anime in French TV. So all those Japanese anime, even if some of them were designed by French people, actually, it was a very strong rise. And we would watch that. And I think it created a whole real generation of otakus. So we were really plugged on that culture, TV culture, and also I began to record TV, late at night, so much more ciné-club side, to see some oldie movie, and I was also going as a geek to the ciné-club in my high school. So that's when I got to meet. That's when I started doing my own curation.
So I didn't know this at all. So you started curating a film club, is that right?
I was too shy to curate anything. I just went to the club and sat and shut my mouth and watched Citizen Kane and The Third Man and all these things. This very classic cinephile culture. And also I was lucky to have a cinephile, and still have a cinephile grandmother who handed me all the American comedy and also a lot of musicals. So it's all
Billy Wilder, Ginger Rogers.
Exactly. And all the James Stewart movies and Karen Red movie, because she was an actor lover. She is an actor lover, and also all the musicals. So I had a very, very strong culture around musicals. Fred Astaire mostly. Fred Astaire team.
Can you tap dance?
I can, because I do. I mean, everybody can. I really can do it very badly. Yeah, but I've tried a lot. Obviously, okay. I've tried a lot for a very long time.
You'll show us another time if not tonight. So fantastic. So we have this. There are lots of images, obviously, in what you're saying, and I'm very curious about your experience in the ciné-club. In that you said just now you were quiet and you were listening, and I think that doesn't surprise me at all, because your characters are always engaged in quiet looking observation at a remove before they ever put their feet in their toes into the water. I'm thinking about water lilies here and the main character. They're always animated by the need to assess a situation before they plunge into it. And I think that's rather fascinating. But that doesn't mean they're not thinking, right? So I just wonder what you were thinking in that film club in terms of the films that you were seeing, and in terms of perhaps at that early age, the gender politics of these films.
Well, I found it all very authoritative and fascinating, because it was authoritative in a way. That's what you're looking for when you go.
The canon.
Yeah, you're going. It was mostly about, for me, it was mostly about being serious about cinema.
Yeah.
Take it very seriously.
Yeah.
So I would go to the ciné-club, and also I would spend all my weekends at the. So this is a faux ami. So it's library.
Yeah.
Library is bibliothèque, right?
Yes.
Okay. I would go to the library, and when I would go like, okay, I'm going to study a contemporary Chinese cinema and the history of Chinese cinema as a 14-year-old, and just go there and just read and study and trying to understand, okay, the big six, okay, change cahier, okay, the politics of cinema also, when I'm passionate about something, I take it very, very seriously, and I think that's what my character do.
Yes.
Of course. Yeah. They might be overthinking, but it's they're taking things very, very seriously. And that's maybe what's beautiful about the coming of age genre.
Yeah.
It's the deepness of the perspective, the depth of the perspective. And it's the same with kids' perspective. I'm being asked a lot these days, like, oh, what's the kids' perspective? No, it's not the height of the camera.
Yeah.
It's not about looking the world from their perspective, which is like a meter and 20 centimeter. I don't know how to say it in inches. You do the math. Yeah. It's mostly about the fact that their perspective is the fact that they are always in collective, they are always dependent, and they are always connected to what's happening. They're looking at their parents, wanting to know them very badly, because they've had a whole life before them. And so their perspective is being very active, very caring, and taking things very seriously. That's a child's perspective. So it's not about it being cute or having this charm or having this poetic look on the world. It's about taking things very seriously. And I think that's why I've always, tried to work around those characters. It's not because of their age or with their candor or it's because of their depth, of the I hope I'm saying this right.
Right.
Profondeur of the
depth of their perspective.
Yeah, maybe that's Kid Gaze. Maybe that's Kid Gaze. It's that you take things very, very at heart, and that's why I'm very, that's why, of course, this is a trilogy, and now I'm going back to kids' perspective, but it's just like trying to have always the deepest perspective. So maybe on family, you should look at a kid, because they will give you the deepest perspective on that, For
sure, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So we have this notion of perspective, which is obviously central to your plots, and we'll get to that in a second. But just to finish on this arc of, your artistic coming of age, in terms of seriousness and craft, mm-hmm. In French, I've invariably heard you say, le cinéma est un métier. Mm-hmm. So, filmmaking is a profession. And what made you want to make it your profession? Was it, clear from the get-go that you were working towards that, or was there doubt in between? Was there even a false start into something else?
I think I'm saying it's a profession because I think it should be taken very seriously, but also because if I had to make a living, I had to make a living out of it, doing it. I see it as a profession, also because I couldn't picture myself doing it if not as a job. And I don't know what's within that sentence once I said it, but I said it.
I'm sort of trying to interpret it on the spot.
Yeah, let's all take a moment.
But I mean, that notion of saying, okay, I'm going to work in film, and I'm going to make it in film somehow. I'll make my way. That leads you to screenwriting. That leads you to that literary aspect of film, which was also, as a screenwriter, you're creating an object. Your final object is destined to be thrown in the dustbin, right? It's that text that's supposed to disappear, and it's painful to see that happen and to see other people's hands on those ideas. Is that perhaps what led you to direct? Or, how did you jump from screenwriting to directing? Did it happen out of desire to direct, or as a matter-of-fact choice of saying, no, I have to see this idea, professionally to the end, and therefore I have to direct?
Well, it's hard to say because I feel from a school perspective, I entered the National Film School as a screenwriter. And it's a very strict school. When you enter as something, even though you're going to go through discovering the whole process of cinema, you should stay where you entered. And, I'm very... I can stay in my... I could at the time. But I directed my first film a year after I got out of film school. So my job was a director. I became a director right away. And so to me, screenwriting has never been, I don't connect, and I know it's true. I'm not saying I was privileged enough to never feel frustrated of working for a script that was going to be directed for somebody else. And that's not because I'm a director, so I have my moment where I can do my stuff. It's because, as you said, screenwriting is about writing something that will disappear. So it's not about what you're going to write. It's about meeting people. And that's about meeting people. And I was lucky enough to work with people that I loved working with.
And there was an inherent joy for you in the writing process, right? Because any screenwriter knows that writing is rewriting, and you're living with a text that has multiple lives, and that for you retains its joy. That retains. It is always for you the center of the filmmaking experience, the beginning and its core, or has that shifted?
I think now I know about joy every step of the way. So. I wouldn't have said that if you asked me a few years ago.
Because quite frankly...
But I've always been writing. It's the French tradition where we work for somebody, with somebody. Yeah. So it's not about, but it could take different shape because I like to work alone a lot. So I tend to work alone and then come back with something and then we talk about it. And that's how I've been working. But it means hours and hours at the table trying to understand somebody. And for me, being a screenwriter, being a director and a screenwriter, I think when I'm hired by another director, he knows that I'm a director. So it's part of the deal. And that deal is that I'm gonna look at my partner in writing because it's not, we're writing together. As a director, I'm going to look at him or her with ambition for him or her as a director. So it's not about, I have the craft of screenwriting and then you're going to direct this. It's about really asking the questions about mise en scène and the ambition of the film, and trying to, to build a script that will have a, and you have a fantasy about it's the director's fantasy about the film, and you have a fantasy about what you want from that director. For instance, for André Téchiné, I work with around in a film called Being 17. He was very accurate about several desires that he had, and I tried to fulfill all his desires for. He wanted that there would be physical battle scenes, but also a very quiet nature that would be his childhood nature. You're in charge of all that, and it's beautiful to be in charge of all that, I must say. And then, so you have that, you're being handed that, and you have to, and it's really playful to try to bring this all desire all together. And it's really also really peaceful, because it's not about your desires. And also you have your own project for the director. And for instance, I had my own project for André Téchiné, and that was like, I want to look at him as a very young man. I want him to make a very young man film. And I'm not going to tell him, because secrets. But that's my secret with the film. And my secret with the film is that I care, and I have a fantasy for him. That is, maybe it's not his fantasy. So that's why I don't do screenwriting anymore. Hey, because it takes so much time and so much empathy, and but that's why it's always. I haven't been doing that much, I must say, because this time it's just so deep. One of my projects is has been going on for years, because there's also that's the film that I released with like directors that but there's also all the work you do.
The other end of the iceberg, yeah.
Exactly, and I've been working, for instance, for 10 years with Jean-Baptiste Delaubier, Parawan, who is the man behind the music in my films around the film. And he's been actually doing it. The film is it's a 10-year work, and it's So there's a lot of there's also things you work around, and you have desire for people, and then it happens. Sometimes it takes years. So I might be a screenwriter. I mean, in the future, but I haven't been writing for other people now for really, 4 years. Yeah.
But at the time where you were still at film school, is this the point where you realized that the types of narratives that you want to tell are not, in terms of gender, what is being told? Because that isn't easy in the French landscape at all to deal with.
No.
And I wonder at what point you realized that it's going to be a hard slog. Was it in conversation with other students? Was it when you did the film that you realized this? When did that happen, that consciousness?
I think it keeps happening. I think I'm much more aware of that now than at the time. Also because, cinema is this very weird art where that is based on reproduction. It's the only art where an artist can be really proud of saying, this is like in this. Mm-hmm. Have you seen, a novelist going like, this scene is inspired from the scene from that book, from that guy 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So cinema is a culture that is with cannibalism and reproduction. So if you love cinema, you love that. Mm-hmm. That's where we are in trouble, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So at first, you're very submissive with that because you love cinema. Cinema is about reproduction. Cinema is a place where you're proud.
Especially as a fan.
Sometimes you're proud of parodies. Yeah. Mm. And that's the beauty of it. Because even though it's the same lens, it's the same shot, it's exactly the same, it doesn't work the same. Mm. So, and it takes a lot of time to stop fetishizing things that give you that kick. Because that kick had a lot of impact in your life. Because that kick, show you loved before you loved, show you sex before you had sex, show you drink coffee in a coffee in Paris before you had a coffee in Paris. So that all those things gave you desire for life.
And this
and maybe
is
that's not your life. Maybe that didn't give you desire for your own life. You know.
But this
so
is,
I think from film to film, I'm really departing from repetition and fetishizing, and maybe creating my own fetishes.
Yeah,
and
that's for sure. And in the clips that we'll show in a second, there's signature elements of Céline Sciamma, which is the best possible thing that could happen to a filmmaker. So we'll get to that in a second. But just in terms of reproduction and this need to not reproduce or to question reproduction, I think for me, now that we have a filmography to look back at together, we have these 5 films. What is invariably there as a constant, as far as I'm concerned, is that political commitment in terms of the gaze, women's gaze, becomes an aesthetic style, right? So we arrive at this sort of, I'm being very academic here, and you'll have to forgive me, but you arrive at this sort of aesthetics of equality. And I think that is, to me, what makes a Céline Sciamma film stand out and bold, is that you are not so much interested in plots where characters are in vertical relations on top of each other, in conflict, pushing down. What you're actually interested in is this, right? This plane of existence. And so when we enter your movies, like your characters, at a remove, it's sort of to understand where the vertical abyss is, and by the end of it, we make that, you walk that line, and you arrive at equality and horizontality. And to justify this thesis, I think it'd be wonderful if you could talk a bit more about your first film, which to me is a very important film as a filmmaker. I'm deeply moved by Water Lilies, which wouldn't translate very well into English if we did translate the French title, which is Naissance des pieuvres, Birth of the Octopi. It doesn't really, and maybe it takes you back to sci-fi. But anyways, Water Lilies was your first screenplay that you ended film school with, and your first film. What drove you to tell the story of these 3 female protagonists and synchronized swimming? Where did that come from?
Well, that's really a personal anecdote. And I went to a synchronized swimming show in my town because my friend, my neighbor, I decided to practice synchronized swimming, which is a hobby that you don't encounter every day. But in my town, I grew up in a new town that was built at the beginning of the 70s, and there was an ice rink. So we had this hockey team, one of the best in France. There was a baseball team. So a new town brings a new culture. Why am I telling you about my town, except the fact that I'm fascinated by it?
Maybe the swimming pool?
Yeah, the synchronized swimming show. So there was also a synchronized swimming team. And my friend, even though she was 14 years old, decided to begin synchronized swimming. And so she was very brave. And I went to see a show. So she was, it's just the scene in the film, it's just the beginning of the film. It's pretty much what I've been through. And I saw then there was like the champions team. And they weren't actually balleting on Verdi. They were balleting on Cotton Eye Joe. And you're going to have that in your head, and I'm going to sing it. And it's a piano, so it's too bad.
Go for
this
it.
Is a piano. There you can see it. I will show you after. But still, even though it was Cotton Eye Joe, I was troubled. I was troubled, and I felt I had like missed my life. Said I was like, yeah, I should have. I'm too moved by this. I should have done synchronized swimming. So I spent like 3 days, thinking I should have done synchronized swimming. Like, why do I feel so lame? Why do I feel like I'm missing something in my life? And it's just that I was so impressed by these girls I guess, impressed because they were accomplished, impressed because they were a team, impressed because they were this, I mean, carnivalesque femininity. And
the makeup and the bodices. Yeah.
And I was struck by the fact that this is a good story idea. You know, this is a good, when you don't understand what's happening to you.
But then you take that troubled.
Yeah.
That trouble, right? That you find in the swimming pool, and you make it into another sort of trouble, which is the one of desire. And this is where we go back to coming of age, and perhaps we could look at a first clip from the end of or near the end of Water Lilies, where that question of desire, dreams as well surfaces again, and then we'll talk about that in a second.
Faut plus qu'on se sépare, Marie. Je fais des conneries quand je suis toute seule. Je fais la fête de la piscine après, tu viens? Non. Allez, viens. Reste avec moi. Non. Je dois y aller. Il y aura François. Arrête avec tes rêves à la con. Il est avec elle. Ils ont couché hier soir. C'est pas vrai. Si, c'est vrai. Rends-toi ça dans ta petite tête. Et arrête de croire à tes trucs de princesse débile. C'est pas vrai. C'est ça. Il me l'a dit. Genre, il te parle. On a couché ensemble. Il est venu, il a couché avec moi. C'est avec moi qu'il couche. Parce qu'elle, elle veut pas. Mais peut-être aussi parce qu'il m'aime un peu. C'est pas grave. Il me reste mon premier baiser. Moi aussi. Moi aussi, tu sais, j'aime quelqu'un. C'est qui? Tu connais? Non.
I think it's always very moving to see that clip. Well, I think we have two elements of your style here. We have two girls in bed talking. We have the first kiss, or a kiss. And we have dreamers and daydreamers. And they're not kindly treated in your world, at least in this film. It's such a tender moment, and is quite representative of the film itself. But why did you feel the need to have these two characters say what they say to each other in that setting?
I think this, it's always really crazy for me to watch clips of Water Lilies, because it's my most conscious gesture, and that it aged pretty well.
Superbly.
And I think it aged pretty well because it's, I see now, when the film was released, the friend character was named Anne, even though she's never named in the film. She's talking about the fact that she slept with this boy, and it's she's saying she slept, but I think now we would look at that scene as a rape, And you know, when I thought about the film, I mean, you know, we're thinking about rape culture. We are thinking about all this, you know. We're all thinking about that. I mean, we're not all, but I mean, we're all in a way, you know, fighting on different sides.
We should, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, yeah, I was thinking about that, but how can we represent rape? How it has always been represented not as rape, and well, you know, all those kinds of questions. I was like, oh, but I did represent it, not naming it.
And there's another scene in the film where the character played by Adèle Haenel is, you know, interrupted in her discourse with the main character we've seen in, played by Adeline Paccard, by her trainer, who says, "Isn't it time for a massage?"
Yeah.
Right? And then the door closes and we don't know what happens there.
Yeah, and at the time I was like, oh, this is too much. Such a crazy person with very, very dark ideas. Yeah. And, you know, it's Adèle Haenel who told me that herself the other day. She went to do a screening in a high school of Waterlilies. And that's what I wanted to tell you. There's a scene after and at the end of the film, after that scene, exactly the scene that you showed, when the boy goes to see Anne's character and says, "I like you," and he actually goes to kiss her, and she spits in his mouth. And at the time, everybody was in the audience, in the room. I've been in a lot of rooms with that film. They were screaming, really screaming, going like, "Ugh," or laughing, and now, in that high school where Adele went the other day, they were just clapping, they was just cheering, and that's why it aged well. It's
a good measure of change.
My most radical film, and because I had all this, because I took very, very seriously what was at stake for these teenagers. So it wasn't that I was politically constructed, that I was aware of the power of images. I was just caring a lot about the three of them. Not one, not the gawky teenager discovering she's a lesbian, and whereas, you know, and the object of all her affection being this, you know, bad girl, or whatever. It's not about that.
Yeah, it's not an ugly duckling narrative. Yeah,
it's about the three of them. Yeah. And Florian's character was very troubling for people at the time, saying like, what does she want? Like, she's the bad straight girl and everything. No, she's the good straight girl. She's just going by the book, and we've all read this book. And the fact that the film is showing that, but also commenting on that between the characters, and that the whole friendship is built around politics in a way. You know, it's built around desire, but it's also built on politics.
Absolutely.
And that's something that amazes me. That's you know, we're talking to young talents. Like, I didn't know at the time. So follow your guts. Just follow that intuition. Your intuitions are political. They are political. They are not your intuitions about what you should do as an image. They're not about your personal stories. They're not about the films you love. They're not about that. Don't lose time. Really, your intuitions, I think our intuitions are political. And that's why we should follow them.
Let's follow them, and let's follow what you mentioned in terms of desire, because there's another scene from the same movie which we can look at and then comment afterwards, but I think it's important to look at now.
Quand on y pense, le plafond, c'est sûrement le dernier truc que voient plein de gens. Au moins 90% des gens qui meurent, tu crois pas? C'est sûr. En plus, quand tu meurs, la dernière chose que tu vois, elle reste imprimée dans ton œil. Un peu comme une photo. T'imagines le nombre de personnes qui ont des plafonds dans les yeux? regarderai plus jamais le plafond comme avant.
Intuitions are political, Céline Sciamma, but so are little gestures, right?
Yeah.
Desire there, that same bed that we'll find later on in the film, and this very tender but very powerful moment of a caress between two girls.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's nothing more accurate than a caress, the choreography of a caress. We always feel like storyboarding. You have to storyboard violence a lot. But caress is about rhythm and accuracy. Being precise is beautiful. Those fingers touching, that was like something that was so carefully crafted. Yeah. But the disappointment for me in that scene, I must tell you, is that, for me, when she says this thing about the ceilings, I'm like, for me, she was serious. It was deep thought, And the first time the film, it was in Cannes, obviously, or the screens, but it kept going. In every country, people were laughing at that scene. They were laughing at that scene. They were amused, but I was taking it so badly. It was like, why are they laughing at such a deep thought? Because it's true, and it's a thought about death. It's a very teenager thought, but I was very young.
It's a thought about death.
But now I know this has also changed. I know that it's less of we're less embarrassed by the fact that a teenage girl could say something that true, actually, and it's not a. But the film was built in a way that it's comedy also becoming, because it's somebody trying to look good, so that's always comedy, right? And then there's the truth of the breathing, and this choreography of the caress, which is also a matrix in my work. Yeah. Because I enjoy a lot doing that. I think I'm coming to terms in that from film to film.
How the body talks and what the body says. Yeah, not only the eyes but the body. And I think I actually want to see the last clip that we have tonight, which is from Portrait, because that horizontality of desire, that political intuition, it's also obviously in this very peculiar film, a beautiful film, where you move away from contemporary France, which was the setting for the first 3 coming-of-age movies, and you plunge us into an unspecified 18th century-esque France, but where these questions of desire and truth are reinvigorated with the same actress that you shot with so many years ago, Adèle Haenel. So maybe we'll look at that last clip and talk about it as well.
Faut se faire. Ne dors pas, ne dors pas, ne dors pas, ne dors pas. J'ai un nouveau sentiment. Lequel? Le regret. Ne regrettez pas. Souvenez-vous. Je me souviendrai de la fois où vous vous êtes endormi dans la cuisine. Je me souviendrai de votre regard noir quand je vous ai battu aux cartes. Je me souviendrai de la première fois où vous avez ri. Vous avez mis du temps à être drôle. C'est vrai. J'ai perdu du temps. Moi aussi, j'ai perdu du temps. Je me souviendrai de la première fois où j'ai eu envie de vous embrasser. Quand était-ce? Vous n'avez pas vu? À la fête, autour du feu. J'en avais envie, oui. Mais ce n'était pas la première fois. Dites-moi. Non, dites-moi. Quand vous m'avez demandé si j'avais déjà aimé, j'ai senti que la réponse était oui. Et que c'était maintenant. Je me souviens.
What is beautiful to you, Céline Sciamma, it seems to me, is when we understand each other. I think that's perhaps the best encapsulation of what your cinema produces in viewers, is to bring us to that moment where the war ends, right?
I'm a pacifist. I'm a strong pacifist. I'm all about bridges. So I'm glad you said that.
As someone, I know that you're a fan of Kubrick, and so is any aspiring filmmaker, right? But there is a particular logic to Kubrick that plays on war, as the canon does, right? And I think your force tranquille presque, your force is that you show us that truth and understanding are inherently beautiful. That the realization of desire is as beautiful as its failures. And this is a constant in your cinema, like a law that governs your work. With Petite Maman, we're nearing a close, so I did promise viewers that we would talk about Petite Maman, which is, as I said at the beginning, a little gift that operates on another level, right? It's less perhaps a question of desire than a question of memory, which is where I chose the previous clip. Je me souviens, I remember. But here memory takes on a mechanic of its own, right? It initiates something in the viewer. Perhaps you'd want to tell us a bit more about what exactly brought you to create that little machine.
Well, our memories, they are part of our imaginations in a way. Some of my memories from childhood, for instance, are clearly things that I remember. And some of them are clearly expanded from the photos, from the memories, the official memories of my childhood. So some of them I'm pretty sure I can see myself in the frame, and some of them I am the character. What if we were building this delicate machine that could make us work on our imagination regarding building our own memories that are as valid as this picture, in a way. That birthday picture where, your uncle has this weird face and and that's you're 6 years old, What if you put somebody else in the picture? What if next to you there's somebody who's dead that you want to have next to you at that moment? This power of a brain that we need so much right now because we're locked in. I'm in that forest, which is in Paris, which is fake. So we need those kind of impulse, those triggers for this beautiful machine that we are with our brain and our heart. And what if we would create a film that would give us the impulse, the tool, the sensation. It's like doing your first hypnosis, an hypnosis session, for instance. Then you can do it. Then it changes the way you focus. It changes the way you leave a room without leaving it. It's an experience. So Petite Maman might be my most ambitious experience regarding how collaborative the viewer is, and regarding how much this time, which is always the project, the viewer is the hero of the film rather than the character being the hero of the film. The character is the hero of the plot. Once more, the characters don't exist. That's why you can write about them. That's why you can imagine everything, or as much as I can imagine what they're going through, what they went through.
Could I just maybe, in terms of that ambition, maybe to specify its nature? To me, up until now, up until Petite Maman, we were in a naturalist, realist framework within a certain tradition of French filmmaking. I think it's not, anything polemic to say. But here, when you say your ambition extends, it does in a very particular manner, in that we begin to dream, actually. So all the characters that we've seen, the female characters that we've seen in bed, thinking, talking, telling the truth, but never really dreaming. And with Petite Maman, it's really you're offering us a dream that becomes very personal. It's a very, very special film, especially now. I think you're absolutely right to say, I know that you started shooting in studio, as lockdown was announced in Paris, etc. So it's a film that was in a bubble of its own, and that is, more or less going to be consumed in that same bubble by the viewer, right?
Yeah.
And in that, it does elicit questions about, without disclosing the conceit of the film. It is a mother-daughter story, but of a very particular kind. And it does work like a sort of, a delicate machine, but also a time bomb. It does open up flows into our memory. It asks us to delve into parts of our memory and parts of our relationships with our parents in particular. And that perhaps is something that, in terms of the metaphysical aspects in your filmmaking, wasn't the case. So where did that ambition come from? Why now? Why that?
Well, that ambition comes from that idea. I mean, I have ambition for ideas. I don't have ambition for myself. I have ambition for ideas that I have when I'm lucky to have ideas. And I was lucky enough to have that one. And so then it unfolded a whole new possibility of cinema, and that's what I'm always looking for.
And you've succeeded.
But every film, it's funny because, I'm being asked a lot of questions about shooting during lockdown and everything, and I keep saying, every film is a personal lockdown. But if you're having this lockdown within a lockdown, then it's not a lockdown. You're connected. And that's the difference, I think.
Céline, I know that we have to bring things to a close, but perhaps that's the best way to do it, in that, everyone who's watching us is in lockdown, but thanks to you, I feel we are all kind of connected through a very particular film and your filmography. So I would like to thank you personally for the opportunity of talking with you. And I'd like to thank the audience for joining us, and wish you all a good evening. Thank you.